Hey everybody, welcome to EOA Daily, and I'm your host, Hermela Aragawi. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have a really fascinating show for you guys today. We have a couple of guests that you might be familiar with talking to us about today's top stories. Take a listen.
I accept this award on behalf of Ethiopians and Eritreans, especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the cause of peace. Likewise, I accept this award on behalf of my partner and comrade in peace, President Isaias Afwerki, whose goodwill, trust, and commitment were vital in ending the two-decade deadlock between our countries.
That's Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed accepting his Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 for making peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea. It was a historic moment for the two countries who'd been in what some have referred to as a frozen war for roughly 2 decades. While the so-called international community appeared to endorse the peace deal, once the relationship between the two countries became stronger, two parties, one inside Ethiopia and a group outside of Ethiopia, began to have a problem with it. The peace deal meant family members on either side of the border were able to reunite, and some trade and commerce were once again possible. It was good news for the vast majority of the Horn, except the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, an ethnic-based political group who saw the alliance as a threat to their power. Even the TPLF's allies in U.S. Congress admit their 27-year era was one of authoritarian rule.
Until recently, many of us were hopefully watching a country that appeared to be in the midst of a historic transition to democracy after years of authoritarian rule.
On November 2020, Ethiopia and Eritrea found themselves at the receiving end of a war that was started by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, who attacked national army bases in Ethiopia and fired rockets into Eritrea.
To be fair, the initial attacks came from the TPLF onto federal military facilities.
The TPLF had great odds, having amassed a reported 80% of the country's armament during their rule. And yet, nearly 2 years later, the war seems to be favoring Ethiopia. Tonight, we discuss the role of Eritrea in defending Ethiopia's sovereignty. Hey, I was talking for the whole time muted. All right, now we're going to start the show. Okay. All right, let's start this over. So today, now I see why my producer was calling me. I thought, why are you calling me in the middle of the show? Anyhow, so today, that's the top story of the day, is we're going to be discussing Ethiopia and Eritrea's relationship and the role of Eritrea in defending Ethiopian sovereignty. We are going to be talking about the evolving relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and the continued attacks from the West, particularly on Eritrea, which continues to stay in the news cycle in some ways. So we're also going to be talking about Haiti and Haiti's fight for sovereignty. I've got a guest for you that you may recognize, Daniela Ben-Ami, who is a Haitian-American journalist, to talk about a recent UN Security Council vote that actually prevented a military intervention in Haiti. And as you might not be surprised, for those of you from the Ethiopian Eritrean community, it was China and Russia's vote that actually prevented that. But first, we're going to talk about the role of Eritrea in defending Ethiopian sovereignty. And for that, we'll be talking to Naaman Zaleka, who most of you know. Doesn't need much of an introduction, but he's an Ethiopian activist, advocate on many different fronts. So without further ado, Naaman Zaleka joins us today. Hey, how are you?
Good, Hermela, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm good. Hey, thanks for making the time. I know you're in an odd time zone. So let's get right into it. We are seeing increased and escalated attacks on Eritrea. All kinds of accusations that come into play, whether it's the focus on President Isaias Afwerki or the internal politics of Eritrea. And something that I don't think we talk a lot about is the role of Eritrea in helping Ethiopia fight against the TPLF, which, as you heard there in the intro and you know very well, had 80% of the country's armament. So truly the odds were in the favor of the TPLF. So when you look at that, how would you talk about the role of Eritrea now and leading up to the transition of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government?
Okay, thank you. Well, first, the current onslaught on Eritrea, against Eritrea, it is a deliberate, highly orchestrated campaign to manufacture consent in the West, among the international community, that the actual fight is being commanded and carried out by Eritrean defense forces instead of the Ethiopian defense forces. This is malicious and carefully designed propaganda, highly orchestrated propaganda, as you can see in all the media and social media, to portray and reinforce the long-standing perception among the West that Eritrea is the enemy and is interfering in Ethiopia's internal affair, that Eritrean defense forces are committing atrocities, and the fake Tigray genocide, which has been the mainstay of TPLF leaders and the TPLF digital, claiming and coming up with all sorts of preposterous allegations that Eritreans are committing atrocities in Tigray. Now, the second part of your question, with regard to the role of Eritrea in defending Ethiopia, I believe that Eritrea's role, when this brutal war was launched by TPLF, we have to understand the context. Very, very vital, which most people miss, Ethiopians and foreigners alike. When the TPLF launched, on that day of infamy, the brutal slaughter of hundreds of ENDF in many of the bases of Northern Command in Tigray, we must understand and come to terms that the ENDF was not at par with the TPLF militarily. Why? Because for 27 years, by design, by careful, deliberate architecture of the defense forces, the Ethiopian military was dominated. I repeat that, dominated. In fact, 95% of the Ethiopian officer corps that controlled especially the core functions of the military, the command, control, communications, was heavily TPLF Tigrayans. Now, you can imagine when that big chunk of the military, in conspiracy with the TPLF leadership, evacuates from ENDF in Northern Command and elsewhere in Ethiopia, the magnitude of vacuum, the huge gap that it would leave. That's what happened on the November 4. The TPLF has been working and planning, mobilizing over 170,000, close to 100,000 militia and special forces. And that was also reinforced by tens of thousands of TPLF Tigrayans in the military and the command of the ENDF. Basically, TPLF members within ENDF who were a big component of ENDF in conspiracy with the TPLF, they were part of this brutal slaughter of ENDF Northern Command. So when that happened, the Ethiopian military, the remaining Ethiopian military, was in disarray, and there was a gaping, a big hole, a big vacuum, because as I said earlier, that's the most important, the vital functions of military, like command of brigades, regiments, and divisions, and the very critical functions like the mechanized units of ENDF were, for the most part, Tigrayans. So almost all, with very few exceptions, were part of the conspiracy planned by the TPLF to paralyze the military. That was the plan. That was carried out carefully and meticulously. And it was orchestrated in that slaughter of hundreds of ENDF troops throughout Tigray was carried out with the complicity and direct participation of not only the militia and special forces of Tigray, but from top commanders, generals to colonels, majors, TPLF member Tigrayans participate in this. And when that happened, ENDF was in disarray, it was dislocated, it was paralyzed, it was in total shock and paralysis. So it is that context, within that context that people have to understand that there was no parity between Northern Command in Tigray and the TPLF-led both TPLF Tigrayans in the ENDF who were part to the massacre, to launching the attack on 4th of November. And also, 80% of the Ethiopian heavy weaponry, including missiles and rockets, were stationed in Tigray. And they cover the smoke screen for TPLF, which, as you know, before the prime minister came to power, the reformist government, it called all the shots, it controlled the military, it controlled the security, it was an overlord power in Ethiopia. So they deliberately planned and moved all the strategic weaponry of Ethiopia, 80% of us on Tigray. So TPLF calculated, number one, if we capture all the weaponry of the ENDF in Tigray, number two, if we make sure, convinced that the TPLF Tigrayans within the military are with us, number three, if we make sure that all the TPLF and other Tigrayans within ENDF elsewhere in Ethiopia to be part of the conspiracy, we can definitely knock out the so-called military that we control. And as you know, they have very, very high contempt for all of the non-Tigrayan military. You hear them saying they are errand boys, they are POWs. All the propaganda by TPLF leadership is displays, proves, illustrates the level of contempt that TPLF leadership have for ENDF, because for 27 years, They were calling the shots. They were in total control of not only the military, but the security apparatus, the justice apparatus, the diplomacy, and the economy. By the way, Hermela, G7, where I was an executive committee member and head of its foreign affairs, and also ISAT. We had several studies and reports because we investigated, and there were findings that the command and control and most of the key functions of the military and security, federal police, were, for the most part, TPLF members. So it should not come as a surprise. It was not like a military versus a military. So it is in this context that without Eritrea's active participation, because Eritrea has a very strong, disciplined, well-organized military, without Eritrea's support, not only when those brutalized ENDF soldiers fled to across the border, some trekking without clothes and shoes because they were cannibalized, brutalized, and were stripped of their clothing, even their, as God knows. It's so horrific. By the way, a must read is a sergeant who was there, Chacho. He wrote a book, horror story, harrowing stories, based on several hundred interviews of ENDF soldiers and officers. That is a must read on what happened, how it happened, even the role of Eritrea. That is the issue of question. So Eritrea fed, it clothed, it provided logistics for thousands of ENDF troops who fled after the surprise attack in the middle of the night, while most were unsuspecting and while asleep. So they fled. Some who managed to escape, those who managed to retreat, those who managed to be alerted at the last minute, they escaped. Eritrea played a vital role in sheltering, providing clothing, weaponry, and all forms of support, moral support, logistic support, so that our forces, ENDF forces, who trekked, who fled that assault, that brutal assault, that horror, were organized and came back. They played a vital role in liberating Tigray during the first phase, along with Eritrean forces who paid dearly, lives and limb, and in blood, and ultimate sacrifices by providing support and by playing a key role in Tigray during the first phase of the law enforcement, which the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed launched a week after that horror, which was perpetrated throughout Tigray against ENDF by the TPLF.
And Naaman, you really laid out the all the resources that the TPLF had, including the 80% of the armament, the security apparatus, the economic stronghold, so much influence, I'm sure, that they were able to garner and plant over the 27 years. And if I was a robot and simply looking at the numbers, I would bet on the TPLF. But what do you think they did not take into consideration, whether it's in terms of resources? I remember listening to a parliament speech by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed where he was talked about how he was rebuilding and renovating the Ethiopian Air Force during his first couple of years because it just wasn't up to par, and there were things that were happening behind the scenes that were strengthening the country's defense because, as he had said to the public, he was not in control of his military. I know at some point he even said he couldn't even leave his house without somebody having to approve it, someone that appeared to be allied with the former government. So Ethiopia had in place a military that was not loyal to the country, as is usually the case, but was loyal to the previous ruling party. And so there were many reasons, if one wasn't really considering the nuances of humanity, to think that TPLF would have, quote unquote, won this war. What do you think they did not consider?
Yeah, very important question. the TPLF, I think, failed to consider, as delusional as they are, that the Ethiopian people, first and foremost, have utter despise and hatred and rejection of 27 years of TPLF's impunity, tyranny, and domination in every sphere of life. They do not consider that anything that they do to come back to power, as they tried, would meet stiff resistance by the people of Ethiopia. That's exactly what happened. Number two, the moral and the courage which their brutality exacted among the ENDF, they were told, they witnessed the terror, the horror, and the sheer brutality with which the TPLF massacred their brethren, their brothers and sisters, ENDF soldiers. Though that really generated the spirit which fearlessly they fought when they came back from Eritrea, and those ENDF forces which were mobilized by the government to go into Tigray and carry out the counter offensive after what happened to Northern Command. So they miscalculated the level of courage, the level of the heroic spirit, their own brutality could unleash among the ANDF, which were told, and some were witnesses, those who were in Eritrea, who went to Eritrea, fled Eritrea and came back. That was also vital. The third aspect is what you say. I think, although the Prime Minister, I have a thesis that the Prime Minister did not really expect the TPLF would go this far in attacking the Northern Command. I don't think the government, as such, prepared, at least until the last few weeks or month after probably the so-called election in Tigray, that the TPLF would go to this extent, unleash such a brutal war, take such a huge risk. Even then, I think there was some preparation, even though last minute, to get some capabilities that tip the balance, including the drones. So those are last minute, even we can say desperate attempts to patch up the capability of ENDF, because ENDF ground forces, even the Air Force, even the Air Force was dominated by the TPLF loyalists. Most of the training, most of the capabilities, by design deliberately, it was made up of TPLF members. And when they left, even within the Air Force, there was a big gap. But the good news is that within a very short time, and this attests to the resilience of Ethiopians, the creativity of the Ethiopians, and also the resilience of the leadership and the Prime Minister, including, to creatively design and put an architecture and an operational plan to ensure that we have the capabilities to resist, not only resist, but defeat the TPLF in the second offensives. And now, of course, due to a heavy infusion from the former military, from top generals and to the military colonels, majors, technicians, trainers from the former airborne, former army, highly experienced during the third regime, those also played in revamping, strengthening, and building the capacity of the military. The other aspect is that there was massive recruitment and training, the fourth element, in making sure that ENDF has now finally the capacity to conduct, well-managed, well-led operations in Tigray. I think these four factors are very important: technology, the heroic spirit and resistance, the rejection of the military, were brutalized by the TPLF and saw the horror and terror committed against their brothers and sisters, the massacre of ENDF Northern Command, the will of the Ethiopian people, the rejection of the Ethiopian people, the spirit of the Ethiopian people, the total abhorrence towards the TPLF, held by overwhelming majority of Ethiopians, not about the past, 27 years of impunity, massacre, genocide, horror and terror, domination, monopoly over economy, society, civil society, journalists being, muzzled and tortured and imprisoned. All that plethora of injustice by the TPLF, Ethiopian people were willing, at the request of the prime minister, to forgive the TPLF. But the horror they committed on November 4th generated and, in fact, brought out to the surface all that suppressed rejection and hatred toward the TPLF by the majority of Ethiopians. And Ethiopians fought in Gondar, as you have seen, in Wallo, in Northern Shoa, in Afar, with such heroism that the TPLF forces were finally on the run, on disarray, and defeated. And now the operation Tigray is going very well, as you know.
Yeah, and Naman, we have a sense of why the TPLF attacked the Northern Command and other stations in that region. We're talking about some of that now. But why did they fire rockets into Eritrea? Do we have a sense of what their purpose of doing that was?
Well, they say Tzadkan Gabretinsa, according to the comical and Alex Duval, Africa's top military strategist, he wrote once, if a person is a top military strategist, they would not plan and undertake such an idiotic strategy, attacking at the same time two forces. They know that the Eritrean military is very strong, highly disciplined, and they have this fear. But I guess, again, they miscalculated. Also, there is another perspective which we cannot rule out. They wanted to force Eritrea not only in the defense, but also in the offense, in self-defense, so that would somehow internationalize the conflict, and Eritrea would get involved so that others on their side would come on their side to support them. That might be also the calculation. But ultimately, both when they started the war and the cyber rattling, the bragging, and anti-Eritrea rhetoric, always on the media coming out and telling the world to your face kind of statements by the TPLF leadership that they would go to Asmara to topple President Isaias Afwerki. All these, at one, we can say they mean it. They know that because of their fear and their complex, inferiority complex, what have you, they have that position where if they threaten Eritrea, somehow they may send a signal for Eritrea to restrain itself. But instead, the continued belligerence, the continued aggression, even physical aggression at the border areas by the TPLF, Eritrea was not left with a choice but to defend itself in the border areas. And I think that's the reason. But also, as I said, they may have calculated that all this would reinforce some of the hostility within some circles of the West towards Eritrea and generate support for the TPLF in this war. I think that's their calculation. Even now, They don't want to say it is primarily NDF. It is Eritrea, because that really plays into the perception, the hostility you see among some the key leaders within the U.S. Executive branch and some ambassadors and the officials within the U.S. government, also within the EU and within the mainstream media and within the academia. All these are, to play into that and to manipulate that the position. So now you see a lot of hostility towards Eritrea on the statements and views and tweets that we see around from some members of the international community.
Right. You actually just answered the question I had for you, which is you see even now during the latest conflict after the TPLF went on the offensive in August, there's this hyper focus on Eritrea. They actually don't mention Ethiopia as much in terms of the TPLF activists and some of the people like Alex DeWall and those that had really close relationship with the TPLF and essentially act as their spokesperson. There's a hyper focus on Eritrea, and I suspect it is because they know that there are actors in the West, including, Ambassador Tibor Nagy, who openly said he had some sort of a grudge with Eritrea's president, Isaias Afwerki. So these are ambassadors that are expressing personal grudge. So it would make some sense that the TPLF activists and the TPLF themselves would hyper focus on Eritrea. Another statement that I've been seeing a lot, I don't want to say a lot, but repeated on social media, is this sense that Ethiopia or Ethiopian officials don't, really mention the contributions that Eritrea has made in this last 2 years of conflict. There's different reasons why that may be the case. We know there's a lot of collaboration behind the scenes in terms of the tripartite alliance and the security of the region. But do you think that's true, or are we missing it, that there are Ethiopian officials or known people in that world that are speaking up for Eritrea's contributions? And if that's not the case, why do you think that is?
Well, there may be many many considerations why we don't hear most senior officials appreciate the role of Eritrea. There may be several considerations. But one thing is for sure, even the Prime Minister, Abiy, has appreciated during his speech in Parliament the role of Eritrea in the first round of TPLF's onslaught, aggression and military offensive on Northern Command. He did explicitly mention the vital role which Eritrea played. Regardless of what some officials may or may not mention, we were the leaders of G7, and also many Ethiopians' goodwill understand that Eritrea played a very important role in bringing about the change, the reform, without the external pressure, and also to a degree with the support of Eritrea. Many aspects of the struggle being waged inside of Ethiopia, including by G7, the moral boost, the media, the information warfare, the informing and really making the Ethiopian people aware of the TPLF's impunity, tyranny, and domination were done via many outlets, including ISAT. The very vibrant psychological strengths that generated within Ethiopians, the resistance it generated in Ethiopia. All this important political and psychological components of the change. And even it gave the courage, it gave some strength and stamina for those within the PDRF to challenge the TPLF. Without the popular struggle in many parts of Ethiopia, popular people's resistance, without the robust campaign and media and external struggle against the TPLF tyranny, those people in the PDRF would not have gotten the strength by themselves to bring about the change. So it's a confluence of factors, including the support Eritrea gave to many Ethiopian groups, including G7, where I was in the leadership, that we saw the change in Ethiopia. So this fact must be appreciated. And the war, the thousands of Eritreans paid in life and limb and blood to ensure, without high probability, that the TPLF would have marched to Addis without the participation of Eritrea. And of course, Ethiopian people rejected, as I said earlier. The hate towards TPLF was absolute. That also is a factor, as I said. There are 4 or 5 factors, key factors. And one is the role of Eritrea in making sure that the TPLF is pinned down in Tigray. And for that, Eritrea played a big role, vital role.
There's a question that's coming in from Sunnight. It's in regards to something that you mentioned at the top of the hour, and I want to give you a chance to answer it. So she says, were there some Tigrayans in the ENDF that refused to be involved? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. According to Chacho, it's a very must-read book, The Betrayed Northern Command, by a sergeant of ENDF who was in Tigray. On that day of infamy, where hundreds of ENDF soldiers were massacred, he undertook a serious research. I mean, I would not say it's conclusive, but he did his best to interview officers, NCOs, non-commissioned officers, and privates, men and women, to understand what happened in many of the bases where TPLF launched an organized, well-planned, orchestrated assault on many bases. So he interviewed those people who are on these bases, who fled, who survived the assault, and he said that there were Tigrayans, however, very minority, who refused to be part of this brutal conspiracy that resulted in the days and massacre of hundreds of ENDF soldiers on the same day in many places. So yes, there were.
And can you say a little bit more about the soldiers who were on the Northern Command that were attacked and had to go to Eritrea, some on foot, some having been stripped of their clothing? What exactly happened there, and what happened while they were in Eritrea that helped them recoup?
Oh no, I mean, it's obvious. Even the Prime Minister was very clear when he reported to Parliament his first appearance after he launched the law enforcement operation back in 2020, after the November 3rd, 4th attacks. He stated that the Eritrean people and the Eritrean government fed, closed, organized, and gave all the logistics material, including war material, for the army, Ethiopian army, to be organized in orderly fashion as a military to go and be part of the counteroffensive. Of course, other forces like Amhara, Afar Special Forces, FANO, and also ENDF elements and units from other commands Western, Southern, and Eastern commands were brought for this multi-front counteroffensive against the TPLF in that area. And the Prime Minister stated the role Eritrea people and the Eritrean government played back then.
And Naman, before we let you go, can you talk a little bit about the change in the way the people have been working together, Ethiopians and Eritreans? You've been working, as an advocate for a very long time. I'm sure you've seen the changes, the evolution of perspectives among Ethiopian and Eritreans. Recognizing maybe to some degree that TPLF was part of the problem. And as a mediator. So can you talk about the evolution of the people's relationship?
Yeah, we can say that we can discuss that in a much elaborate detail, but I would give a few points here which are pertinent. It's very important to understand that during the Derg and during the TPLF, there was an orchestrated heavy propaganda hate that was churned out repeatedly in many platforms and several media outlets, and the perception among many Ethiopians towards Eritrea and the leadership was very negative, including me. Before 2005, when the TPLF stole the election, massacred over 200 Ethiopians in Addis Ababa. It was a turning point for me. Before that, my perception and my feeling towards Eritrea and the leadership was very negative because I grew up under the Derg. I was a little kid when the revolution came, and I happened to be from a military family. And my view towards Eritrea and Eritrean independence and Eritrean liberation and Eritrean leadership was very negative. And I can't say much about my own family, which has ties with Eritrea, not blood ties, but my father spent most of his time in the ports Massawa and Assab, as he was the naval officer and then the chief administrator for Ethiopian ports. So there was that sense of first betrayal, that where my father toiled to build those ports because he was the chief administrator for 17 years, from the very day, few months after the 1974 revolution until the end of 1991. And he's credited with many measures and the positive contributions to the development in Ethiopian ports. So that by itself, and then at the personal level, at the political level also, we grew up under a condition where Eritrean struggle was portrayed as being the proxy for the Arabs and petrodollar, back then it was called, etc. The perception, not only me, of majority of the Ethiopians was very negative towards Eritrea. It is during the struggle that we understood the struggle against the TPLF, especially after 2005, when we established a relationship with Eritreans and we understood them, we studied their struggle, and we came to understanding that Eritrean struggle started not out of vacuum, ex nihilo, but because the successive Ethiopian governments also committed many blunders and many mistakes that pushed the Eritrean people towards struggling for their independence, starting from the Emperor Haile Selassie, abrogation of the federation, dissolution of the federation, that really started it. And then subsequently, when the Ethiopian military, which was under the Derg, of course, the military fought for Ethiopian unity, but some of the elements within the Derg security committed atrocities in Eritrea, and all that contributed to pushing the Eritrean people for struggle. So that understanding emerged emerged for me and for many Eritreans when we discussed, when we really came to understanding and trust that you start to empathize with how their struggle started instead of what we have been fed. So reading, discussing their literature, EPLF literature back in the days, including when the TPLF told EPLF told the TPLF that ethnic division of Ethiopia and the Tigray Republic agenda, which the TPLF entertained, were wrong. We read those. We discussed with the people. We discussed with their scholars, with their intellectuals, with the political leadership, the military leadership. So that understanding created an empathy why the Eritrean, struggle came about, and also understanding how treacherous the TPLF is in starting the war with Eritrea, and the cost on the lives and the economy and the social fabric both in Ethiopia and Eritrea. The really lost 2 decades, appropriately named, 2 lost decades for peace, stability, and economic progress between the two people. Ultimately, our people, Eritrean people, Ethiopian people, there are so many ties and bonds, historical, cultural, and although the political, work and the cooperation in many domains needs a lot of work, I think we should understand and come to terms that in this region, not only with Eritrea, but Somalia, the Horn of Africa, we need to work towards peace and stability. We need to work towards regional security architecture. We need to work towards elevating our people in the entire region out of poverty, and ensure that we rely on ourselves. And that needs trust and confidence. And that needs a lot of nurturing of what has been achieved by President Isaias and Prime Minister Abiy, rapprochement and the agreement to really come to peace and bring about peace between the two countries, where for 20 years, almost 20 years, there was no war and no peace condition. And it needs a lot of work going forward. And this is vital for Ethiopia, vital for Eritrea, vital for the region. But for all this, the stumbling block, the biggest threat remains to be the TPLF, which is delusional, cannot recognize and accept the reality. As we said again and again, they controlled everything in Ethiopia, the situation where most of the power was taken out of their hand, and they were relegated to regional leadership. They could not accept at the psychological level that condition. And remember, Triyu Mesfin, Abbas Eye, all these big wigs of the TPLF, old guards, were attacking the prime minister in the reform process the very first few months of the transition. They were belligerent from the beginning. The war, in fact, started not on November 4, 2020. The war started when they took turns all over the state media, Tigray media, to berate the prime minister, to call him names, to really negatively portray every effort to turn around and to bring about reform, political and economic. They undermined it through their poisonous propaganda. So they really started the war because they could not accept the fact that militarily, security, economic, diplomatic domination and hegemony, which they enjoyed, now has ended. They could not come to terms. All this propaganda, all this veneer, smoke screen about federalism, about unitary, Abiy being a Halawi, that Tigray sovereign, autonomy, and this so-called nation nationalities, which is really a figment of their imagination. There was no equality of nation nationalities. I mean, we have to be honest. Here you have a group that claims to represent Tigrayan people. As you know, it doesn't represent all of the Tigrayans. But let's assume 6% of the population had the lion's share, near monopoly of everything in Ethiopia. And they talk about nations and nationality. How can you justify 90, 80% of the key functions in the military, in the security, and the lion's share in the economy, 40%, not only effort, but many, several big companies owned by TPLF members or their cronies? How can you justify that you have brought about all the people of Ethiopia, Oromo, Tigray, Amara, and others, have a fair representative share both in the economic, social life of Ethiopia? That didn't exist. That didn't exist.
Yeah, I
So,
think the TPLF is really just known for its, contradictions, right? They talk about self-determination based on ethnicity, but where was that during their 27 years of rule? If all
nowhere to be found. They committed genocide in Gambella. They committed genocide in Ogaden. They committed all sorts of atrocities. Regional leaders like the Benishangul president, the one-time president of Benishangul, and many other regional leaders, let alone do, even if they did a fraction of what the TPLF did, you know what the TPLF did? Automatically, they would be, go to jail. That's what happened. Let alone all this catastrophe that the TPLF committed, and a minor infraction, a minor, challenge to their hegemony, exacted a heavy price for many regional leaders and many officials who dare to say, who dare to go against what the TPLF wanted.
Yeah, and before we let you go, Naman, I want to end on a positive note. Per usual, the TPLF takes up space in our life, but which makes sense based on the amount of atrocities that they've committed. But you said we've lost 20 years. Ethiopia and Eritrea has lost 20 years because of some Western interference, outside interference, TPLF being the proxy. Let's envision 20 years from now. What is possible with peace and stability in the Horn of Africa?
Well, for humanity, for us human beings, both at the personal level, at the political level, it boils down to choice. We need to choose peace and stability, collective security in the sub-region, collectively have an arrangement, an architecture to defend ourselves, have a framework for economic cooperation, have a framework for development, have a framework how to really expand the opportunities for our people who are, for the most part, in poverty in the entire region. So if there is a will by the leadership of the region, each country, we have to make choice to build that common architecture for economic development, peace, stability, and security in the region. And that's possible, given a far-sighted leadership. It may not come within a day or a week or a month, but it needs nurturing, and trust and confidence is very important. Not only the calculus of power, who has, military or economic power in the region, but trust and confidence is very important. We have a lot of challenges, and we must tackle them. Not only the known challenges of poverty, but there are many emerging challenges coming up. The world is becoming more disruptive, more complex. The international order itself is challenged. So there are many, mega challenges that needs regional cooperation, trust and confidence among the leadership, people-to-people relationship being, built and nurtured. All this would help in steering the region towards a more prosperous, a more hopeful, a more stable, a more secure environment and region for all our people Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti, and others, and so the two Sudans. So it needs a creative innovation and intervention on the part of the regional leadership. And in this regard, towards that end, intellectuals, media, the civil societies have also a vital role to play towards that direction. And, it's always greed and the calculus of raw power, a real politic, which is really cynical, that pushes, nations and leadership into maximizing their own narrow political gains and political power. But that's short-lived. I think we have to aspire to elevate our people out of poverty, the region at large. We have a lot of potential, a lot of resources, untapped resources. So we can tap them by putting a framework how we can work together, cooperate together for mutual benefit for all our people and our countries in this region.
Certainly a lot of work ahead, but so much great potential, as you mentioned, Nam. And thank you so much for making the time. Thank you for your insight. Really appreciate it.
You should appreciate me more, because I have refused to appear on many medias because I
know.
Talked for 20 decades, over 20 years. So it is time for you and your likes to speak now, but you insisted, so that
I insisted today, and I appreciate you making the time today, especially considering it's an odd hour where you are. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Armella. Keep up the good job.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Thank you, everybody, for continuing to tune in. Thank you for those who are contributing to the program via comments and questions, as well as supporting independent journalism. We're going to talk a little bit more about Eritrea from the perspective of an Eritrean. I've got Emmanuel Bidamariam, who's going to be joining me in just a minute. We're going to talk about the history of the U.S. and the West relationship in the Horn of Africa, including Eritrea, and then a little bit background on the role of Eritrea in helping lead Ethiopia to the 2018 transition by working with opposition forces, opposition members and groups that were trying to get some democracy in the EPRDF space in the 27-year TPLF-led government in Ethiopia. So let's take a look at our top stories. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share right now. Share the link with all your friends, group chats, on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, Telegram, whatever your choice of platform is. Let's take a look at our top story for today, and we'll get to our next guest.
I accept this award on behalf of Ethiopians and Eritreans, especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the cause of peace. Likewise, I accept this award on behalf of my partner and comrade in peace, President Isaias Afwerki, whose goodwill, trust, and commitment were vital in ending the two-decade deadlock between our countries.
That's Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed accepting his Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 for making peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea. It was a historic moment for the two countries who'd been in what some have referred to as a frozen war for roughly 2 decades. While the so-called international community appeared to endorse the peace deal, once the relationship between the two countries became stronger, two parties, one inside Ethiopia and a group outside of Ethiopia, began to have a problem with it. The peace deal meant family members on either side of the border were able to reunite, and some trade and commerce were once again possible. It was good news for the vast majority of the Horn, except the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, an ethnic-based political group who saw the alliance as a threat to their power. Even the TPLF's allies in U.S. Congress admit their 27-year era was one of authoritarian rule.
Until recently, many of us were hopefully watching a country that appeared to be in the midst of a historic transition to democracy after years of authoritarian rule.
On November 2020, Ethiopia and Eritrea found themselves at the receiving end of a war that was started by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, who attacked national army bases in Ethiopia and fired rockets into Eritrea.
To be fair, the initial attacks came from the TPLF onto federal military facilities.
The TPLF had great odds, having amassed a reported 80% of the country's armament during their rule. And yet, nearly 2 years later, the war seems to be favoring Ethiopia. Tonight, we discuss the role of Eritrea in defending Ethiopia's sovereignty.
Great. On to the next part of our program. I'm going to bring in Emmanuel Bidemariam to discuss some of the background context of the West relationship with the Horn of Africa, particularly Eritrea, and the role of Eritrea in helping Ethiopians get to the 2018 transition that saw Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed take power. Emmanuel, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I think you're doing an awesome job, just establishing the narratives in the manner that we should have it. And I'm so glad to be here to be part of the Eye on Africa and just share our views, our everything to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. So, it turns out people say this, that the truth speaks for itself. No, it doesn't. Not in this world when all this propaganda is an interest is taking place. So, let's talk about the perception of Eritrea. I mean, I think the West has done an incredible hit job on the perception on Eritrea. I mean, there is information that Ethiopians who are now a lot more engaged in the political sphere and a lot more aware of the way the West, through its mainstream media apparatuses, can really paint a picture and accurately, like it has done with the current conflict. So walk us a little bit through the background in terms of what's up with the West's attitude towards Eritrea. What is this about? Let's go back a little bit in history.
I think we are talking about so many layers of historical backgrounds, and it's really hard to pin it down to one. But the demonization of Eritrea started after the war with TPLF in 2000. And the reason they demonize is so they can penalize you and justify their actions based on the demonization, just like what they did in Libya and other places. So everything that they said, pariah state, the North Korea of Africa, a hermit state, insulting President Isaias day and night, because they thought if you take out the president, then the rest will fall. So they targeted President Isaias. One thing that they did not account for is the resilience of the people of Eritrea. And we went toe to toe with them. We fought them tooth and nail from the beginning and to the end. And we had the people outside. We had the experiences of Gudli, the armed struggle. Our people were united. And also, we understood exactly what was going on with the TPLF because we understood the historical background of the TPLF. And Eritreans were really quick to catch up with what was going on. We immediately get into the war mode and started challenging all the Western narratives and learned how Western democracies, the media, the mainstream media work. Just like what's happening now with Ethiopia. Nobody is talking about the Ethiopian side of things. They're talking about the TPLF. They're talking about everything TPLF. They're not talking about your side. They're not talking about fairness, balance in news, and that kind of stuff. So we, for a long time, fought it, and we are at a point where now, with the Ethiopians on our side, together, we're able to do a lot more damage, just like what you're doing right now. We're beginning to really get our voices out, and that is what's going on. But the historical background, I think, more on focus should be from 1991 to 1993, when the Bush administration and the Clinton administrations transitioned during the Cold War. That is when the TPLF came. That's when the Black Hawk Down of Somalia went down. And that's when the United States decided that they're not going to put boots on the ground anymore because they didn't want American troops dragged down in the streets of Mogadishu and other places in Africa. So the TPLF was a willing partner. The TPLF was a perfect prototype for what they wanted to achieve. So they militarized the TPLF. They sold the TPLF. They propped the TPLF globally to really have a high position in the African Union, the European Union, with the G7, G20 countries. They sold them really well at the United Nations. They became the peacekeepers, peace enforcers. They basically allowed them to do everything so they can be the extension of the hegemony of the United States. And we have seen that in Somalia. We have seen that in South Sudan and Abyei, where the division line between South Sudan and Sudan. We have seen it in Sudan. We have seen it in different places in Africa where the United States used the TPLF, including Eritrea, to destabilize and just basically do what they want to do in many parts of Africa. On top of that, they were using the TPLF to sell the African agenda to Africans. This happened at a moment in history when the United States was a unipolar nation. The Soviet Union was in the worst possible position not to be able to contend with the United States. The Chinese were close to the Americans. As you probably recall or know, historically, during the Nixon era, I think it was 1972, Nixon went to China and established relationships with China. By 1978, the U.S.-China relations took to a different note. And the reason why they did it is because they wanted to make sure that the China and Russia did not coalesce. They did not come together. These are two communist countries, so socialist-minded countries. If they came together, then that would have been extremely difficult for the European and Western nations. And this was an agenda they have done. They have worked for a long time, started in 1941 in the Horn of Africa, and they pursued it, and they were almost successful until about 2008 when Putin came to power and started reversing things. And so this is the historical background in terms of, I think it's a very, very critical element, and to a lot of Ethiopians especially do not know how the United States came to Africa, came to Ethiopia, came to the Horn of Africa, what they did. The United States came to Eritrea and then Ethiopia in 1941. They were dealing, of course, with Haile Selassie. Prior to that, their thinking at that time was to come into Africa. But to come into Africa after World War II would have been extremely troubling for the United States as a colonizer. So they wanted to come in, they wanted to have control of Africa, but they did not want to be seen as a colonizer. That was the first time that they thought that they could come to Africa. And this is at the time where the British and they were fighting the Italians in the northern theater, or the northern part of Africa, against the Italian colonizers that controlled Ethiopia for 5 years. So in 1941, the Italians were defeated. Haile Selassie came back to power, and they created a mechanism, a federation, to be able to get into Eritrea. So they can sit in Eritrea, crafted a federation program that connected Eritrea and Ethiopia, and then eventually they did away with the federation program that they created, so Ethiopia can annex it. And this was strategically done because Eritrea and Ethiopia and Africa was extremely important to them. And there are so many reasons why Eritrea was important, because it's on the Red Sea. It is a very, very high elevation. And from the city of Asmara, there was a camp called Radio Marinara. The Italians controlled it. The Americans wanted to control that, and that was a center for their intelligence operations in Africa and throughout the world. From Asmara, from Kanyo Station, they were able to listen to the Russians, and throughout the globe. And by coming into Eritrea, connected with Ethiopia, having the African Union, the Organization of African Union at that time, unity at that time, they were able to create anchor state programs, divided Africa to 4 different divisions. On the west, you have Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Ethiopia, and then you have, I think, Algeria in the north. And so and in between, they had this regional economic communities, or RECs, such as IGAD, ECOWAS, and those kinds of things. And now we have the AFRICOM, that is the military wing of it. And so they had a pretty good idea on how to control it. Eritrea was a strategic point. They had something called triangulation. I'm going through everything as fast as I can because it's just so huge.
It's a lot. And I want to follow up with you about one thing, but I want you to finish your thought.
Okay. So the triangulation is from Eritrea, Israel, and Iran. The Strait of Hormuz in Iran, the Red Sea, and also Israel. They control some of the biggest resources, oil resources of the world. By doing that, they had the upper hand on the Russians and all their competitors. And NATO was established, and they had a pretty solid ground on Africa. And what we are witnessing today is the reversal of that. Today, the TPLF is in Meghaleh. The United States chose to support the TPLF, and the TPLF is in Meghaleh. All the U.S. influence that started in 1941 is at the end of it right now. I know you want to say something, so please go ahead.
There's actually, I'm getting comments both on my phone and in the comment section, so I'm trying to keep up. So a couple of things, because I just this is more because I don't know, but also these questions come in. There's this sense that that some people, maybe particularly Ethiopians, I would say, have that where if we just present it to the politicians in the West a certain way, if we just try to work with them, they'll let us have our sovereignty. And my understanding is that one, in modern history, Eritrea has tried to work with the West at times. But even going back, you mentioned the Haile Selassie era and how there was essentially like a spy station in Eritrea, and that was sort of what the Ethiopia had to offer to the West. And maybe, just maybe, that's part of why there was this sense of respecting Eritrea, at least respecting Ethiopia rather, Haile Selassie, the leadership. I mean, a lot of those pictures, you really present an Ethiopia that appears to be respected, by the West, but we don't talk about what had to be given up for there to be friendly relations. So can you just talk a little bit more about that?
I think that's really an excellent question. Haile Selassie, when he came back from Italy, from the West, from exile to Ethiopia, Ethiopia was in the worst possible position. It was decimated by the Italians. That Haile Selassie didn't have full control of the entire country. As an example, up until 1943, the first Wayane the rebellion that started in Tigray, was because of the vacuum. Haile Selassie didn't have control over. So at that time, their main focus was Eritrea. So in order to appease the situation, the British bombed Wayane, the Wayane movement, and quelled it. And then Haile Selassie had full control of Tigray. This just is a little bit of a historic anecdote. This shows you how much the West was interested on our region. Secondly, they wanted Ethiopia to be the face of Africa. As an example to that, when Haile Selassie asked for armaments, he asked the American government for armament. They told him, we cannot really convince Congress that we are going to be able to give you the armaments unless you show us something. And what you can do is, there's a war, the Korean War. If you represent Africa and go to Korea, and and then the Congress would be apt to believe that you are going to be a partner for us. And so Haile Selassie sent the Kanyo Battalion. That's the reason why the American station in Asmara was called Kanyo Station. And so named after the Kanyo Battalion. And so you have America wanting to make Ethiopia the face of Africa, to lift the image of Haile Selassie, and just gave him everything. They brought him to the United States, met with Kennedy. He went to Jamaica. His aura, his gravitas was lifted, and he lifted Ethiopia in ways that no African leader can do today. And this was a very, very unique and moment of history. It also goes to his brilliance, to his ability, to be able to sell himself. He spoke French, and so that helped. So the United States always wanted to use Ethiopia to sell its agenda to an African face, to the world as an African face. And they did it during Meles Zenawi's era. They took him to every G20, G7 meetings. But to the second question, could the United States change its approach if it got what it wanted? What the United States wanted or wants, that a lot of people don't understand, is something called the heartland theory. The heartland theory is the area that is concerned, the heartland of the world, is Russia and the periphery of the Russian, like Poland, all the European countries that are in there, and the Middle Eastern countries that the United States had total control of, because they had Iran, they had all the Saudi, they had the European countries on their side, and they brought in Israel. Jordan is a part of what they were doing. So they had pretty much the control of the heartland. If you control the heartland, which is Russia, which is why we're fighting in Ukraine now, then you control the world. It was the whole idea. And that was what they were trying to do. Now, what the United States is doing essentially is basically to revert back to 1941, when they had the upper hand, to bring back that dominance so they can still have a weaker Russia. But things have gotten out of their hand, because China, especially after 2000, during the Clinton era, when the Clinton administration signed the US-China Act, that really gave Chinese companies freedom to be able to do a lot of things in the United States. And also, after that, they allowed them in 2001, they allowed them in the World Trade Organization, that basically allowed China to blow up in ways that are unique, and things are completely out of their control. And at the same time, Eritrea was gaining a foothold in the region, remaining strong. And now we are in the situation that we are. The United States is in the worst possible position, and Russia and Europe with China, and in the Horn of Africa. So that's kind of like a small picture of the overall picture. This is huge that we need to discuss piece by piece, but we are a part of a much bigger picture. We are in one of the most important geostrategic places, one of the most richest places on earth, and this is what we need to know as Africans. We are sitting in a great place. And one more thing that I would like to add, the fact that Eritrea and Ethiopia are connected together now, militarily, economically, in terms of our mindset, politically, and diplomatically, and most importantly, the people-to-people relation, trust, that we have with the people of Ethiopia, the trust that the Ethiopian people have on the government and the people of Eritrea is really something that's never been seen before anywhere in Africa. And it's also something that you cannot see anywhere else in the world, maybe between the British and the Americans, but none of the European countries have the kind of relationship that Eritrea and Ethiopia have. And that is going to be a significant development for the rest of the world, for Africa, and because it's going to have a spin-off effect in ways that nobody, especially in the United States, expected it. And that's the reason why the Biden administration had one of the worst times of its history, and they are just looking like they are lost completely. So I'll stop there.
Great. There's actually some questions coming from the audience that are probably better than the ones that I'm coming up with. So I want to give you a chance to answer them. And you can add caveats if the question is, needs a caveat. But Debebe said, why did the Americans choose Ethiopia to be the face of Africa? Any thoughts on that?
I think that's an excellent question. Immediately because it's very closely associated with the Red Sea. Immediately because they established a base in Eritrea. They had a connection with Haile Selassie. They had a master plan. The United States wanted to come to Africa in 1941 to 45, at the time where they established the United Nations. They had 4 or 5 different reasons why they wanted to come to Africa, but they wanted to come in a specific way. At that time, African people, African nations wanted to become independent. They did not want to be colonized anymore. They did not want the United States and the British and the French did not want nations that are nationalistic. They also did not want leaders that are nationalistic. They did not want the Soviet Union to come and support all this nationalism that was budding in Africa. They did not want to lose the former colonies, so they wanted to make sure that the United States have a place in the former colonies. And the way they did it is they divided Africa into 2. They used the French, the former colonizers, and the British, the former colonizers, to continue their legacy. And they created this Francophone and Anglophone idea that you see, that 14 countries that the French are playing with right now, and Kenya and all those different countries that the British, including Sudan, that the British were involved in prior to World War II, were a continuation of that legacy of World War II and before that. And the United States wanted to continue that. So they empowered the French and the British. The French, as you know, in World War II were in a pretty bad shape. They were defeated by Germany. They were conquered, and the British were battered. They were in the worst possible place that they can be. And, so the United States, giving them a seat at the Security Council with a martial law, basically revived them, gave them their place back in Africa to exploit the resources of Africa and be strategic partners. That's the reason why Ethiopia was perfect. They wanted to have the African Union, or the Organization of African Unity at that time, so as a center of Africa, so they can control a lot of the African related agendas from one central place, from Ethiopia. They didn't have to have bilateral relations with all the different countries. All they have to do is just come to Ethiopia and meet all the ambassadors of African countries and deal with them, do business with them. So the United States didn't have bilateral ties with a lot of different countries. So that's the reason why the United States focused on Africa. It was on Ethiopia. It was extremely sellable, very easy to sell. People loved it. Africans loved it. Kenyatta and all the people at that time in the area, they loved that idea. Haile Selassie was extremely personable and charismatic and very well accepted and respected around the world. And so that really played extremely well to their games as well.
One of the things we hear, as a generalization about Eritreans are so united. They know a lot about how the West plays. They're not ethnically aligned, at least especially when you're comparing it to the rest of the Horn. But I've spoken with some Eritreans who say we've had growing pains as a community over the last several decades. It's not like everybody knew what was going on, was on the same page from the beginning. So can you talk a little bit about some of the growing pains in history of the Eritrean EPLF and a lot of different groups that were there, and just the understanding of Eritreans in terms of how external actors can cause divisions?
One thing that we have to be very clear is a lot of our issues, Ethiopian issues, Eritrean issues, all the issues that are in the region are across the globe, they are not domestic. They are all imported. We would not have all these problems right now if it weren't for the Western interferences. It was going on from just days. Anyway, during the Federation, after the Italians were defeated, the British controlled Eritrea, and the British military administration, the BMI, controlled Eritrea. One of the best aimos of the the British is divide and rule. Throughout Africa, throughout the world, everywhere they go, what they do is they make sure that they divide. So they inject religion, they inject ethnic, regional divisions, and they deliberately brought that into Eritrea just to make sure to divide Eritreans. And during the British, the Eritreans were there were historic references to where Muslims and Christians fought. And actually, a very, very interesting side story. Meles Zenawi had an interview with Paul Hens in 1990. This is just right at the time where Massawa became independent. And Paul Hens interviewed him, and he was asking him about Eritrea. And Meles was telling Paul Hens, Eritreans cannot come together. They're not like the Tigrayans. Even if you look at Sudan's in Sudan right now, there are Muslims, Eritrean Muslims. They are going at each other, killing each other. They're not like Tigrayans in harmony. So they bet on the fact that Eritreans were divided, and clearly Eritreans had these divisions that were injected into our lives. The harmony was touched in some ways, but during the struggle that manifested during the struggle, it became a war, a civil war that we went through. Thousands of Eritreans were killed during the fights with EPLF and ELF, and this was really an agonizing moment for our people. During Haile Selassie, there were all kinds of regional differences that were injected, Akalugzai, Hamasin, those kinds of things. So there was not that harmony. But during the struggle, the independence movement, first for the ELF and then later on the EPLF, especially the EPLF, really pressed on the harmony and the ethnic harmony of our region. They educated our people, meaning that the masses must be educated, conscious, and armed in any and every possible way. And that over time, settled. Self-reliance idea comes, and because we didn't have any support from the West, we didn't have any support from anybody. We have to be self-reliant. And throughout the world, because of our issues, we had to depend on each other, and so that kind of brought us over the years. And the organizational structures that the ELF initially, then especially the EPLF brought in during the struggle, kind of went on abroad and followed us. And Eritreans were organized throughout, whether you were in Saudi Arabia, whether in Sudan, everywhere we went, we had organized communities everywhere, because that's how we supported our families. That we established all kinds of structures to send money, to meet each other, to gather, and to educate each other, to be aware. And the kind of things that we did was just simply amazing. And then over the time during the struggle for independence, Eritreans were organizing everywhere to make sure that we can help and lobby together we were lobbying churches, we were lobbying schools, we were lobbying institutions and government institutions before the struggle, I mean, during the struggle and after independence. The names of Eritrea name was excellent. We went to churches, everybody knew Eritreans as brave fighters and just hardworking people, very creative people. And when the demonization came, then we glued together and start fighting it. So that's the background to your question.
What are some of the most, I've heard, I've talked to Eritreans, of course, just some people say, there were some sticky points in even modern history where some Eritreans were reading some of the narratives in mainstream media outlets, generally, very Eritreans, but there's been sticky points within modern history where there's been kind of some tension among Eritreans who essentially are on the same page about things, but were being, pulled in different directions because of some of the narrative clashes. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it was overcome and what, if anything, wasn't overcome?
I think it's a really, really interesting situation. You have, after independence, people like Jehovah's Witnesses that did not want to acknowledge the independence of Eritrea. They did not want to vote for Eritrea. So those people, some of them were forced to leave. So they left with grudges. So I'm talking about the layering of the people that could oppose. And there were people that had interest when, before the EPLF took control of Asmara, and that left. And so, and you have people who were in different fronts during the struggle that were never able to come to terms with their defeat. And there were also elements within the government of Eritrea that were not satisfied and wanted to do a regime change. And within Eritrea, and they coalesced with the TPLF, this is during the war, and ended up really creating tremendous amount of problems. Those people were inclined ethnically. They had families, abroad, and they were working with the TPLF, and so they were the reason why that energy, the division came up. There were people that were in prison who wanted to do a regime change, and so that became a very, very big dividing force. And then the TPLF, over the time, started using the hardship that it created, pulling Eritrean youth away, and those youth came out and started campaigning against the government of Eritrea because the TPLF had a pretty good strong hold on them. So there were some seams that were loose, there were some cracks that were being formed, but the people knew that this is going to end at the end with the TPLF. And as time went on, as the real, actor behind the scene start falling apart, and now that Ethiopians are coming, all their avenues are being closed, like they used to have bases in Tigray. A lot of the elements that work for them outside and pretending to be Eritreans, all this negative image that was created by them is going to fizzle down because the real Eritrean picture is going to come, and it's coming because of what the geopolitical change that's happening, and also the situation in the ground we controlled extremely well, and that's really going to transfer into the image of Eritrea that we knew before. It's going to come back because we are sitting in one of the golden areas of the world, and I think we are destined for greatness. And the fact that we are doing it with the people of Ethiopia and the people of the region, fully knowing that everything that Eritrea went through is basically a sacrifice that we made for the rest of the region. We are becoming the pillar for the region. We are the pillar for the region. And just because we stood, Ethiopia was able to stand. And so now with one of the things that Liz talked about is the Arabian-Nubian Shield, which is resources rich area of the world that incorporates Sudan, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, and the other side you have Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen. All this area is one of the richest places on earth, and because of that, our area is going to be on top of that. We have the Nile waters and all the resources, agricultural resources that we are going to be able to utilize. I think one of the things that you asked, Brother Naaman, is what are you hopeful about? We're just so hopeful about so many different things. We'd love to talk about it, and so we are looking for a lot of positive things. The fact that Eritrea and Ethiopia are winning is going to make a difference. Our future is going to be really good. All the divisions that you saw in the outside abroad by Eritreans, Ethiopians, and everywhere, as soon as things start getting better economically, hopefully things will change. We start looking towards the economic development rather than our divisions.
And as we're wrapping up, we're running out of time, but there's so many good comments and questions that are coming in. So I'm going to call this the lightning round, where I'm going to present these to you and make your answer like 1 or 2 questions, or 1 or 2 minutes rather. Okay. Let's see. Quainan. Ooh, that's a different name. Quainan Ari says, can you ask, can and should US aid be kicked out of Ethiopia?
Yes.
I know it's a hard one to do. Okay, great. 1 second answer. Done.
Yes, yes, because the USAID is a tool to weaken Africa, to give aid, to pacify so people don't work, so they can control the manufacturing, the agriculture, and everything else. So the sooner we get done with it, the better off we'll be. And Ethiopia is way in its way by really being self-sustaining. So
here's another one. This is, I don't know if this is, I've heard this before too. So let me just not preface it. I'm just going to read what Tababa said. He said, Abu Sabhat actually said Isaias actually wanted to become the president of Ethiopia after the Derg regime was overthrown. So why have Ethiopia and Eritrea separated to begin with? Can you answer this to this comment?
There's a good saying in Tigrinya, Yurdaka. It means Yurdaka, God help you. So we just let it go. We let it go.
Is there any truth to that, or is that just something that floats around?
No. I mean, the people of Eritrea they died for Eritrea. Just everybody that I know, died for Eritrea. Just the TPLF is outrageous with its lies. So.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. A couple more. Who is going to succeed? I'm reading this question without having read all of it, so Lord help us all. Who is going to succeed Isaias? Will his successor follow the same policy? I am truly asking because it is natural for all people to get old and retire.
I'm going to be very honest about it. There's no way you can predict such a thing. There's no way you can predict such a thing. But Eritrea is a very, very organized society. And also, one thing that we have to know is that the Eritrea managed to get away with the waves of attacks that destroyed many countries because it was very, very careful on how it approaches things. If you see President Isaias, he comes out and speaks. None of the other, individuals come out and speak. And that way, all of them are capable to articulate our views and everything. I've met pretty much all of them. And I understand their thinking process and everyone. I think we are going to be okay. We have a process in place. How it's going to play out, I cannot say, and I'm just going to be very honest. But this is what I know for sure. The region is going to change. It's going to be economically viable, and that's going to dictate the kind of leadership that we are going to have. It's got to be modern. It's got to be energy. With that, we need a lot of energy, and it's also going to be somebody that's security wise And I think we have a lot of people that can do that, a lot of people that succeed that. Eritrea is full of a lot of brilliant people, but who it's going to be, I have no idea.
I love it. Very, very good answer. Very politician answer, but very good. I mean, I don't know what more you could give us than that. Okay, a couple more lightning round. Got a really smart audience today. I think every day, but a lot of good questions here. I didn't even have to come up with any because apparently people had some. But Kenobi says Eritrea got accused of supporting Al-Shabab and was sanctioned and blackballed by Western nations via TPLF propaganda. However, we trained the Somali army to fight Al-Shabab. Make it make sense. Can you address that?
You know, when they want to penalize you, they'll create any kind of a story, just like they did in Libya. And the Al-Shabaab angle, the fact that they were saying that Eritrea was able to transport military wear through the Indian Ocean, where all the American vessels and the United States is in Djibouti, and made it able to stick at the United Nations. It shows you how much control that they had over the United Nations, and that's what they did to Libya. They used the United Nations to destroy it, and so they will make any stories just like they're making right now with the genocide claims. So they are going to keep doing that all the time. Now we are lucky. We are at a point where the Russians and the Chinese are strong, and they are resisting any attempt to do any kind of R2P or responsibility to protect base humanitarian intervention anywhere around the world. So they like to do this, but the people of Eritrea withstood all their pressures, and it was really fascinating. I've written about it a number of times. All countries, Sudan, South Sudan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Kenya, sat in the United Nations and accused Eritrea of all the worst things, including attacking Djibouti when Eritrea was actually attacked. So, they will make all kinds of lies to be able to get whatever they want to get. And the destruction of Eritrea was their primary goal, and how they did it, it didn't matter. So that's that.
Yeah, during our show yesterday, we talked to Sheikh Abdi Hirsi about the recent Al-Shabaab car bombings and how it's just Al-Shabaab appears to be on the rise ever since the shift in leadership, and just a lot of other things shifting from the West, and just trying to figure out what exactly was going on. But anyway, in that report, we talked about how Eritrea was one of the first countries, if not one of the few, if not one of the only African countries to actually send condolences to Somalia in the recent attacks and express its solidarity with the people and the government against Al-Shabaab. So just wanted to throw that in there. Okay, two more, and then I've got Daniela waiting for me in backstage, so we'll wrap it up. There's so many good questions. So Zed said, Eritreans are reasonable people, truly. We stayed friends all these years, true Habesha. So that's the comment, but my question based on that is, do you find that Eritreans are able to put aside politics when it comes to friendship and family, or is it like, are they more like Ethiopians? Are they more like Ethiopians from Tigray right now? Or like, just tell us, be honest. How is it when someone just has a completely different take and they're your aunt or uncle or, mother-in-law? I'm just making things up. But how do, compared to other communities that you're aware of, how do Eritreans handle strong political differences?
Okay. We have, because of what happened to us, we were able to compartmentalize our thoughts, our feelings in ways so we can deal with our relationship. I grew up when I was a kid. My sister's husband was an Ethiopian Air Force pilot, Naizgi, and then he became Ethiopian Airlines pilot and unfortunately died. But at that time, his friends were like Gashna Amin, Gashmer Tigane. These were Ethiopian Airlines pilots that actually attacked Eritrean rebels at that time, struggle fighters. They called them rebels. Eritrean, and they were bombing them, and they will come to our house. And you have your feelings, but you cannot be rude. And when I came to the United States, all my friends were Ethiopians. in Grand Rapids, in Holland. Actually, some of them are very well known, extremely well known. I have friends that were from Haile Selassie, and they never really supported Eritrean struggle for independence. But I maintained my friendship with them. I spoke Amharic as a result. አማርኛ ለመናገር እችላለሁ. I can speak Amharic.
Show off. Someone's already asking me to speak Amharic.
I learned Amharic through them. I never really took it personally. Eritrea's journey was Eritrea's journey, not against the people of Ethiopia. It is for the independence of Eritrea. And when we became independent, a lot of them did not like it, but I maintained my relationship with them. They are still my friends. Their kids are my friends, and we are still very good friends with each other. I have absolutely no problem, and I go to Ethiopian restaurants. I don't see that reciprocated by Ethiopians when it comes to Eritreans, because they really had a hang up for a long time. So I would like Ethiopians to reverse that and start patronizing Eritrean shops, and just going to Eritrean places, and really this is a new era for us, and I think we need to really straighten our heads and just focus. And also I think we saw the relationship of the Ethiopian and Eritrean people when the peace situation came up between Eritrea and Ethiopia in 2018. The reaction was really unrehearsed. It was organic. It was just so natural, and it's never been seen anywhere. It was artificially muzzled, and we just need to build up on it.
Great. So you're in the DMV area. There's a rally coming up on the 4th, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it'd be the anniversary of the attack, the November 2020 attack. Talk a little bit about the importance of people showing up to that rally.
Okay. One thing that we have to know is that Eritreans and Ethiopians are victorious right now. The reason why the people of, the reason why the South Africa is happening today is because Eritrea and Ethiopia won. That's something that we need to know. We are in a very, very victorious moment. In 2008, 2006, you remember Ethiopians were demonstrated in Glen Eagles in Canada, Glen Eagles, England, in Washington, D.C., everywhere. And the closest that they can get to Mellis was, when he was driving away from a distance. There was no access. Ethiopians were crying. Nobody was listening to them at that time. You remember Susan Rice laughing, the 99% election results. And, she didn't believe it, of course. So that was the experience that Ethiopians had. They didn't have access to their country. They didn't have access to their leadership. They didn't have leadership. And now they have access to their country, to their leadership. Their leadership is fighting for them. The leadership is not only fighting for them, but they've won against what the Ethiopians were fighting for all these years. And now what they fought for, the TPLF, is cornered in Mekelle, Tigray. And what happened? The influence of the United States is all saturated in that small area. They don't have any place else to go. And so they're trying to save the TPLF in any way that they can. And that is what is going on in South Africa. And the people and the government of Ethiopia are saying that we gave you a mandate when we elected you, and we have to finish up the TPLF. And this is what is manifesting everywhere. And it is support for the people of Ethiopia. It's support for the Ethiopians that are fighting to really clear that area, become truly independent. And for the first time, Ethiopia does not have to be subservient to any Western interest. And this is really an incredible moment in history. And because of the defamation and everything else that they're doing now, we are standing together to show them we are connected. We are in a much stronger position. We are not in this worse position that we were before. And not only that, and there is an election coming up. We are going to be factors in this election. We're going to make a difference. We're going to do it as a block. And so Eritreans and Ethiopians are coming together in order to be able to convey that message, in order to be able to rally each other, support each other, to get each other out, so they can, they can vote to the candidates that they must vote, to make sure that they send a message, and also to change the trajectory of what the Democrats have been doing over the last 2 years. What they've done over the last 2 years is counter the interests of the United States. Hear me again. What the Democrats have done is against U.S. interests in the Horn of Africa. And if you look at it in Europe and Ukraine and everywhere else, it's the same thing. But in the Horn of Africa, the Biden administration bet that the TPLF is going to win. The TPLF did not win. The Biden administration bet that Eritrea and Ethiopia was going to lose. The TPLF did not win. Eritrea won and Ethiopia won. And now they are left with a bag of a bunch of, a bunch of really sellouts that have really done a lot of damage to the Horn of Africa people. That's going to impact people for generations to come. So this is a moment that we are going to be able to send a message of solidarity, a message to the world that we are a bloc that is going to be able to contend on so many different levels. And that's the reason why it's very important. That's the reason why everybody has to come and express their support, show their support. And this is history. We are witnessing the end of an era, colonial era. We are witnessing the ushering of a new Eritrea, Ethiopia, Horn of Africa that is going to flourish in ways that we can all go behind and support. So, that's my take on it. We are in a very, very good place. We are in a very opportune time. This is a time where we need to support each other. We need to have each other's back. This is a time when we have to communicate with each other. This is a time that we really need to act to really make a difference. It's a very, very short window that the TPLF has, and it's done. It's almost done. Let's make sure that we kick it to the point where it will never rise up to do the kind of damage that it did in the past. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually think the fact that we're in talks is a really great sign. The fact that the TPLF has to sit at the table when it's often used to solving its issues by having people pick up guns is really something else. And I've been told by a government source that the Ethiopian delegates in South Africa are actually going to be making an announcement in the next day or two. What that announcement is going to be, it remains to be seen. So Emmanuel Bidemariam, thank you so much for your time, for your insight. Thanks for answering a lot of the audience's questions. Anything we didn't get to, hopefully we'll get to another time, but really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Awat nahafash.
Okay, awat nahafash. I love it. See you soon.
Good night. Good
night. All right. Thank you guys for continuing to tune in. I hope you are liking, subscribing, and sharing. I was just told I was able to confirm from a source that there will be an announcement on the Ethiopia peace talks in the next day or two. I'm just as curious as all of you are what exactly that announcement is going to be. I really don't have much details. All I can tell you is so far it hadn't been going well unless something changed in the last day or two. But, remain hopeful in that sense. So my next guest is from Haiti. A lot of you may have heard of her or known her or from the Twitter spaces or previous interviews that I've done. But a great supporter of Ethiopia and Eritrea, someone that I met early on in this conflict when I was able to connect the dots on some of what the mainstream media was doing. And she shared something of mine and said, yep, Haiti knows about that. Something that was happening to Ethiopia, Eritrea had happened to Haiti for a very long time. So that was the beginning of a long friendship. And there's just so many parallels in terms of what happens to Haiti and what's happening to Ethiopia and what's been happening to Eritrea. And right now, Haiti's really in the midst of fighting for its sovereignty. There's been protests happening for months and even years on a different level. So we're going to be talking to Daniel Ben-Ami in just a second about that. First, let's take a look at this.
Today, our focus is Haiti, a Black Caribbean country with a population of about 12 million that has been fighting for true sovereignty since it became the first Black nation to free itself from slavery in 1804. The people of Haiti continue to fight And in recent years, more and more Haitians are protesting, saying no more to US-installed puppet leaders, embargoes, sanctions, and other forms of economic and social warfare from imperialist countries. In a move that outraged many Haitians and allies this week, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for UN troops to be sent into Haiti, allegedly to curb gang violence. And today, the US drafted a UN Security Council resolution to support that. All moves many Haitians see as a military invasion of their country and another violation of its sovereignty. UN peacekeepers also have a dark record in Haiti, the introduction of cholera to the island and sexual abuse, including that of children.
So there's been some updates since that report. The UN did actually bring up the UN Security Council to try to vote on bringing UN troops or troops into Haiti, and it was China and Russia that vetoed that effort and averted what my guest would say would have been a military intervention into Haiti. Without further ado, Daniela Ben-Ami, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much, Irma. It's always a pleasure to come and talk to you.
Same.
It's good to be here.
Forward to this. I continue to say Haiti and Ethiopia has so many parallels. We need to learn about each other. As mentioned a little bit in that intro, the fight for sovereignty for Haiti has been going on for a very long time since they were able to kick out the French colonizers. There's just been a series of systems put in place to try to prevent true sovereignty in Haiti. But first, I want to talk about the latest developments with the UN Security Council vote. What was the vote for, and what did it mean for Haitians that China and Russia vetoed it?
Well, even before the vote, we've been really pushing on social media for China and Russia to actually reject the military intervention, the possible military intervention in Haiti, because right now there is a struggle going on in Haiti between the gangs. Haiti has all these gangs, and according to Komokoda, a grassroots organization in Brooklyn, there are about 500,000 guns in Haiti. And Haiti, as you know, lost its de facto president a year and a half ago. This July will be 2 years. So it's been under constant chaos. And what most people don't know is that this chaos has been orchestrated by this core group, what I often call the Collective West. And when we talk about the core group, it's a group of diplomats, mainly from Europe. I'm talking about Germany, France. I'm talking about England, and obviously the United States, Canada, Brazil, the UN, as well as the OAS. So they have formed sort of like a committee to really, really stay on Haiti's neck. And that's what we've been fighting against. Haitians are just really tired. We're saying no more to the idea of whenever the US wants, or whenever the core group wants, they can just go in and out of Haiti as if it's their private home. And that is what we are fighting for right now. We want to say no more. We want to have an end to this madness, to this idea of always trying to actually invade Haiti. So that's what we are. So Haitians were extremely pleased. Obviously, because we're really hoping that China and Russia would see through the, to the shenanigans of really thinking that a military will solve Haiti's solution, when in fact, the reason why, Haiti has a gang problem is because of the core group. The core group created these gangs in an effort to actually keep control of Haiti. So it was really interesting when you were speaking earlier with several of your Ethiopian guests. I was like, oh yes, there's the similarity on how TPLF is used in an effort to sort of like, basically create division between the government of Ethiopia and the Ethiopian people. And it's the same thing that's being used, like the a group of gangs are being used in an effort to actually keep the country where it is. So we are very excited. But it's not over, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The U.S. is still trying to push to find, now they're looking for a country to actually take the lead to invade Haiti. And we'll talk about that too. So that's what we are. But we are fighting. In fact, we have a couple of demonstrations coming up that I want to definitely share with you and your audience. That way everybody knows exactly what's going on in Haiti.
Absolutely. Can you break it down to those of us who don't know who the core group is? I mean, I know we talk about TPLF a lot, and you know who they are because you've been following the story. But for a lot of people who are hearing about Ethiopia's story for the first time, it's always good to just say it's the rebels. They were, part of the regime for a very long time. Who's the core group?
So the core group is basically a group of diplomats. So you have a diplomat, like an ambassador from France, from Germany, from England, from Canada, and obviously from the US. And that's the group in the UN, obviously the UN and the OAS. So this group has decided illegally, without the authority of the Haitian people, that they are going to run Haiti. They are going to govern Haiti. So that is the current occupation that Haiti is under right now. Haiti is not being governed by an elected body. Haiti used to have 7,000 elected officials, and through the UN proxy, which is called BINU, Haiti has absolutely no more elected officials. There's only one guy that's leading, and his name is Ariel Henry, and he actually came to power by the UN. The woman who's leading the UN in Haiti basically sent out a tweet, on Twitter, basically informing everybody, oh, by the way, this is the guy that's going to be leading Haiti. I mean, it is just absurd. It is just absurd. Like, to think about what is happening. And I want your audience to understand exactly what is going on. Why would a group of European countries, along with the US and Canada and the UN and the OAS, decide that this is the guy that they want to lead the country after a president was assassinated, which, by the way, no one has been able to, there hasn't been any investigation. No one has been found guilty of the assassination. So Haiti is at a turning point right now, and so we really want to push for the gangs to basically leave. That way Haiti can have a proper election, and Haiti can sort of kind of return to its sovereignty. That's what we're pushing for. But it's a long road ahead, because we need to make sure that there will not be any foreign intervention in Haiti. And that's why people have been on the streets for the past few months. Many of us are on Twitter, we're on Facebook, everyone on social media, and we are writing letters to the UN directly, to China and to Russia, really demanding that they do not approve a UN military. And so far, so good. They have vetoed that process. And even though now, the core group is still pushing, particularly Canada. Canada is leading. I need to make sure that the audience is aware. Canada is really has taken the lead in terms of, pushing for this intervention. And the reason why Canada is actually taking the lead is because Canada has an interest in mining in Haiti. And to them, they feel like they want the Constitution to change. This way, whenever a law is passed, it can be passed through just the president instead of having to go through the three bodies, which is the legislative body of the Senate and the president. So we are definitely educating people and letting the Canadians know, as well as, people who are who have a vested interest in Haiti, understand that Canada is really leading this behind the scene push for invasion.
Let's talk about that, because I saw your comment. I meant to actually message you, but I thought, we need to have a phone conversation about this. So we're gonna have the conversation now on air. So there was a there's reports that Canada might be taking in some of the TPLF leadership for amnesty. Mixed feelings about that. I think some people, in some ways, they just say good riddance. Some say no, they need to face charges. But I think both sides say, why Canada? And I think there was a tweet from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, the Ethiopian Prime Minister. It was a very friendly tweet for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, that they met, etc. And I saw your reaction. I believe Jemima was in that too, saying, do Ethiopians know about Canada? So let's have that conversation. What was it that you wanted Ethiopians to know? And I know you've touched on some of this already.
Absolutely. So at the moment, once China and Russia vetoed the request, actually, that came from Guterres, basically they were sort of like, I don't think they had a plan B, because I really thought they were going to be able to push through the resolution. So when China said no, they had to sort of like go back to the drawing board to understand, okay, how can they push this through? And I think the impression was, well, if Canada really wants this, the U.S. Secretary of State gave Canada the mandate to sort of like lead the relationship, right? So we are very concerned about, all of a sudden, the Prime Minister of Canada is also, calling, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. So because what Gutierrez has been doing, he's the head of the UN right now. He has been, going to different countries, and no one really understands why. Some of us in the community believe that the reason why he's traveling to all these places is because he is looking for countries that are willing to provide military UN peacekeepers. The problem is, since they were rejected by Russia and China, the other option that Gutierrez said was, well, why don't we do a non-UN peacekeepers, which would have been more deadly, because that basically means that they would actually hire mercenaries to go to Haiti to actually kill the protesters, the people who are resisting, who are fighting against imperialism in Haiti. So we are watching Canada very closely, because right now they do have a problem, because for some reason Canada is saying, well, we really don't want to go to Haiti. That's a very difficult file, but all of that could be a lie. We are learning, according to a former military person from Haiti last week, that one of the reasons why the UN cannot find basically mercenaries, that's what we're calling them, because China said no. They said no to the UN peacekeepers. So now they have to find another unit, and that unit basically is not going to be associated with the UN, which is completely illegal. So that is something that I am so happy that, and I'm seeing the Ethiopian sisters and brothers, a lot of their support on Twitter, on social media. So we are very grateful for that. So we ask that you keep us, in the forefront. But because right now they are basically looking for countries that are willing to actually provide them with soldiers. And once they find that, then they're gonna figure out how to actually send it. So that's why we've been keeping the pressure on. We've been sending letters. We have a demonstration coming up in about 3 weeks, just to actually let the world know that this is not something that Haitians want. In fact, one of the things that your audience needs to understand, the reason why both China and Russia, one of the reasons why they vetoed the resolution that the US wanted to push a military in Haiti as well as the core group, was because their logical conclusion was, well, Haiti right now does not have a legitimate president. The guy that's there now was elected with a tweet. So I want people to understand that basically the woman who leads the UN in Haiti, Binu, okay, Madame La Lime, she basically sent a tweet and elected our president. I mean, even though he's a de facto president.
That's Helen La Lime, right?
Yes. She is in Haiti, and she's in charge of Binu. Okay, she's in charge of Binu in Haiti.
Talk a little bit about her, because it's always good for that for those of us who are studying countries as a new student. It's always good to know the faces that pretend to be speaking for the country. So as I pull up La Lime's photo, just talk about what she does, where she comes from, and you've already talked about how she essentially sent a tweet saying that who was going to lead Haiti. But what more can you tell us about her?
Absolutely. So Madame La Lime was hired by the UN with a very specific goal. And her goal was to go to Haiti to accomplish two goals: to accomplish a fake election, and also to push the Haitian government to change the constitution. In fact, under Jovenel Moïse, the de facto president who was assassinated almost 2 years ago, the UN was part of the process of consulting the Haitian government in terms of rewriting its constitution. And that's one of the reasons why for weeks that the people of Haiti, they were on the streets, because you have to understand the way that the people of Haiti get any kind of justice is through the streets. That's the only way they can actually get to, force these people to hear their voices. So far, Helen La Lime, she has not been successful because the Haitian people rejected the Constitution because there were so many perverted things that they wanted to push in the Constitution. Where at the time when there were a few elected officials, they pushed against the UN. They said no. So Jovenel Moïse, who was the de facto president, died about 1.5 years ago. And that was at a standstill. And Haitians are like, you will not change the Constitution. So let me make something else very clear too. There are a lot of Haitians, not a lot, but a number of Haitians that are from the elite that are pushing for the Constitution to change. And what they want from the Constitution to change is because it will be in their favor. They want to change the time. And I mentioned this last week during a Twitter space. They want to change, instead of having, a one term, they want to be able to have a back-to-back term, and each term is 5 years. And Haitians cannot let that happen. And our argument is the people who are basically logical and rational and believe in Haiti's sovereignty. Our argument is, let's say, for example, that Haiti does need a change in its constitution, right? I can understand that, and that may be true, but how is it, the right of the United Nations to have an influence on how a sovereign country constitution actually gets written? That is what is very problematic, and that people need to know. Okay, if a constitution change needs to take place, the UN must not be present in Haiti, because it will never be an independent constitution. Absolutely. So she has failed in those regards. And from what I understand, her term is almost over. She's supposed to leave in December. but no one really knows the exact time. So that was her goal. That was the reason why they hired her. And she has made a mess. She actually went to the UN during one of the UN resolution meetings, specifically stating that they need to actually have a federation of the gangs that the whole world, especially the core group, is yelling, oh my gosh, that Haiti is actually have all these gangs, and we need to do something about all these gangs. But she's the one that actually allowed these gangs to exist. And what I want your audience to ask and to understand is the questions that we need to ask are: one, Haiti does not produce guns. Haiti does not produce ammunition. Haiti does not produce any of these things. Where does Haiti get 500,000 guns? So we have to ask, so how do you allow 500,000 guns to come into the country under your watch? Because the idea of a UN peacekeepers is to actually create peace. But we know from Ethiopia, we know from Honduras, we know from so many other places that they don't create peace, but they create disaster. So that's who she is, and we are pushing back against her. When I say we, a large portion of the Haitian population, we are standing together. This is like, it's just been amazing to see all hands on deck where we are pushing and we are saying no. I am hoping that this will be the last time there's any kind of, if Haiti can get through this will be the last time that the core group or any other country thinks that it is okay to basically invade Haiti whenever that country feels like it, that it is wrong. Just the idea, and I want the my fellow Americans to understand that you have to really understand that it's wrong. Haiti is not at war with anybody. Haiti doesn't even have an army. Haiti is not a threat to anyone. So why would you want to go invade that country? Because a small group of elites are asking you need to come because they are overwhelmed by a system, by a group of gangs that you have orchestrated. So
yeah, let's talk about that, Daniela. About, you said that Haiti does not manufacture guns, and yet there are 500,000 guns on the streets of Haiti. And we've talked about this, and I just want the audience to understand better. What was the use of the gangs in terms of monopolizing power by the elite few, and how did that get out of control of the very people that may have had a hand in creating the gangs?
Absolutely. So and Haiti has a history where the UN sends troops. At one point, Haiti had almost 15,000 US peacekeepers in Haiti, and they have created havoc on the lives of the Haitian people. There's been a lot of documented rapes of young boys, rapes of young girls, rapes of women. They have created a disaster. In addition to that, they also have basically destroyed one of the largest rivers in Haiti, where it was needed for the people to, it was a source of water for them, a source for them to drink water, to take care of, to wash and to do everything they needed to do. So because of the UN peacekeepers, they actually contaminated the water with cholera. And over 30,000 Haitians have died, and close to 1 million were infected. I know there's like this consistent number of 10,000, but that is a lie, because in the 10 years, there were more than 10,000 there. It is estimated it's close to 30,000 people that have died. So because the UN could not maintain, because they spend at least $1 billion a year to keep all these troops in Haiti. And Haiti has gotten worse. So finally, after a lot of activist work, a lot of pushbacks, in the Haitian community, and also some friends of Haiti, with pushing the UN to leave Haiti. So in 2019, it went from 14,500 to 5,000, and then to 3,000, and then in 2019, 5,000 people, U.S. peacekeepers left, UN rather, and then we have about 2,000 of the UN peacekeepers, but they changed the name, right? Because they don't want it to be labeled as UN peacekeepers, so they change it as, well, they are just UN personnel. But the UN personnel, they actually were infiltrated into the police, and some of them were Black, which is something that that was very interesting. That was a way for them to actually say that they were training police in Haiti, and they left about 15,000 police in Haiti. And many of these police officers, many of them are the ones that actually are contributing to the gang process in Haiti. So because the UN could not stay, the peacekeepers could not stay legitimately. So Haitians saw that the gangs were replacing the UN peacekeepers in an effort to provide like a safety net for the elite. Because here's the thing: if the UN peacekeepers leave Haiti today, the 2,000 person that they're calling personnel, and if they get rid of the gangs, the elites will have to leave Haiti. They will have to leave Haiti, and they know that there's no way in the world they're going to be able to sustain the population, because the population is ready to explode, because the people cannot eat, they cannot work, and because of the terror that these gangs they basically have blocked all four corners of Haiti, where people cannot travel from east to west or from north to south. And that's very deliberate to create the kind of instability to the point where, the UN can say, well, Haiti is so unstable, they need our help. We need to actually, send a UN peacekeepers. And when that failed, now they're trying to actually put together a mercenary unit to actually send to kill the people who are protesting against a UN occupation or potential UN occupation.
That is so interesting. About the mercenaries, I remember when I first heard UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres say, it's non-UN personnel needs to go there. And I saw Jemima's reaction and your reaction. I thought, wait, that means it is mercenaries, was my initial reaction. Yesterday, we had Claude Gatabuke from Rwanda on, and he was talking about how Rwanda's Paul Kagame is notorious for actually sending his troops to areas like Haiti or other parts of the world where UN needs somebody else to do their bidding. Do you know anything about whether a lot of the troops come from Rwanda, or where else do they come from when they do?
Well, yes, actually, Africa the continent is one of the several places where they usually get the peacekeepers from. And they also get some from Latin America. For example, Bolivia contributed to the UN peacekeepers. Also in Asia, you have from Nepal, from Bangladesh, obviously, yes, and Rwanda as well. And the way that the scam works is through IMF money. So what the I call them the colonial West, because it's not just one country, it's the few European countries that want to continue to maintain their colonial system across the world, that the entire world seems to be revolting against, and they are winning. the way that they actually use these countries, let's say in Latin America and the Caribbean, and also in Africa, is they will use the IMF to give these countries large sums of money. And with these large sum of money, it's usually for climate change, which is baloney. It's under the pretext, well, this money is for climate change, is to, for agriculture. But we are finding out that right after that money is dispersed, especially in 2010, if you follow what happened after the earthquake, you realize that a lot of the money that was being provided, they were actually for some of these UN peacekeepers in order for them to stay, in Haiti. So that is one of the mechanisms that they use to really use the soldiers to actually, and it's not just in Haiti. They use the soldiers in different parts of the world, and that's why one of my Canadian, I call him, Jafric Haiti, he was pushing for asking African soldiers to not participate, to not come to Haiti to kill Haitians because of money. Because it doesn't end well. It doesn't end well. The U.S. has gone through Haiti 3 times to occupy it. And that time it was the U.S. It wasn't just the core group, but it was used to the UN and the OAS. So we are basically seeing another version of that. For example, this week, we're finding out that there's another Haitian journalist, Daddy Shiri. She really understands the complexities of the UN. And she actually reported how there are 2 countries right now in the Caribbean. They haven't been able to find any in Africa yet that we know of. But publicly speaking, there are 2 countries, Jamaica and Barbados. They actually have shown interest. They have actually expressed interest to the State Department, stating that they are willing to actually, quote unquote, help Haiti by sending, some of their soldiers, to Haiti. So these are the countries now that we are writing, that we are addressing and pushing, because I don't think the sisters and brothers from Barbados or from Jamaica are aware of what is going on, that their government is actually pushing for intervention in Haiti, which has nothing to do with stability, but it's a way for them to actually kill civilians and people who are resisting imperialism. So that's really, really important for people to know.
Yeah, that is a very concerning point we're going to have to follow. I mean, the IMF loans are something that are being held over Ethiopia's heads. The economy has a lot of potential, but certainly struggling in a time of war, like so many other economies around the world. And so it is concerning to hear that countries like Jamaica and Barbados, one of its leaders, I don't know if she's the prime minister, but she seemed to be speaking in a very reasonable and firm manner when it comes to pushing back on the West's financial system and how it's really just not equitable. And so, yeah, I mean, I am just curious to see which countries actually send their troops. And I'm a little bit nervous that Ethiopia might get involved, but it remains to be seen. So there's a really specific question. If you're not able to answer it, it's about an official in Canada. Okay. Daniel, I'm going to pose it to you. So Michelle Jean is apparently the former governor general, head of state in Canada, and she's originally from Haiti. Do you know anything about her and what her take is?
Yes, Michael Jean. She's basically a Haitian that was propped up in Canada, where they gave her a high position in the government. And her job was not necessarily to really help the people of Canada, but she leveraged her position, as far as I could tell, as well as many Haitians in the community, that she was not really there to serve the Haitian people in Canada. but she was there to really serve herself. And Haitians have very mixed feelings about her. But yes, I definitely know of her.
Wow, that's okay. Go Jabril came up with a great question. Before we wrap, Daniela, tell us about some of the demonstrations that are coming up and how people can support.
Absolutely. So there are two quick things that I want to tell you. So for the last 2 years, Haitians have been struggling with, having to push back against taking control of a narrative, right? Because one of the things that's been very interesting since, the emergence of social media is how we are witnessing like people, foreigners, and they can be, U.S. citizens that call themselves journalists, filmmakers, and they are basically trying to speak for Haitians. They are trying to tell Haitians, this is what we think. This is what you should do. This is what's happening. And in many instances, these foreigners, they do not speak the language. They don't know the culture. Some of them, they've been to Haiti for about maybe 3 months or maybe 3 weeks. And they come back to the US and they're telling everybody and they're behaving like they are experts. So there are two specific white males. And for the past 2 years, they've been propping one of the primary gang leaders. Incidentally, this gang leader named Bobby Q was specifically listed on the UN resolution that actually was published on October 21st. And he was specifically labeled as one of the lead characters to be sanctioned because he has committed, and this is according to quote unquote the U.S. Papers. He has committed, a lot of atrocities, a lot of crimes, but these two white males who live in the U.S. One lives in Brooklyn. Kim Ives is actually the editor of Haiti Liberté. This is someone that the Haitian community does not know him, but he swears that they do. When I go to demonstration, the last time I saw this gentleman at a demonstration was right before the UN vote, and he was there to take pictures. But for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, they've been telling people on Twitter that they're actually doing this documentary, and they've been propping this gang leader as a revolutionary, even though a number of Haitians on social media, on the radio, people who live in Haiti, people who live in the US that are Haitians, that speak Creole, okay, that live in the community, were telling them that this guy is not a revolutionary. This guy has been killing people. It is documented in Haiti, the crimes that he's committed, that he is not a revolutionary. So do not prop him up, because it is an insult to the families of those that he has killed. And I kid you not, the height of arrogance from these two men. I even challenged one of them, and he basically made me feel like that I didn't know anything that I was talking about. I didn't know what I was talking about.
Isn't it so interesting that, I mean, I just wouldn't have the audacity, right? You go into a new place, you don't speak the language, you maybe spend a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then you come back and you were telling a narrative with such confidence that you're even willing to just discount the voices of so many people from that country. I mean, Lord, give us just half of that confidence.
I mean, it's amazing. And the thing that that's amazing to me is how they are like literally like practically like cursing, like Haitians, saying you are a fraud, you this and you that. And for me, my challenge to them, especially the guy named Dan, My challenge to him is for him to go to Brooklyn and he'll let me know who recognizes him. That is my challenge to him, because I know if the Como Koda community goes to Brooklyn, I know the Haitian community know exactly who these people are. But I dare them to go to Haiti, to Little Haiti and Brooklyn, and for anybody to recognize him. The same with Eve. Nobody knows him. Nobody knows it, but he swears, he tells people, oh, they know us. We're always in the community. I go to a lot of demonstrations, Ermela, and I rarely see this man. So you wonder if you're in solidarity with us, and you are concerned about Haitians and Haitian democracy, how come we don't see you? How come we're not working together? But clearly you have your own agenda. So finally, Komokoda had enough, because there was an article that was written, because apparently there was some, he was upset. He wrote an article after the UN resolution document where they rejected, the US military. And then in addition to that, not only did the resolution, reject the military, but they also specifically added this guy, named Barbecue, as the lead person to sanction. So I think an embarrassment. I think they got exposed, because here they are. They were in the process of completing a documentary about this guy, prompting him as a revolutionary person in Haiti, even though a lot of Haitians in Haiti and in the US are telling him, you are wrong. He is not a revolutionary. He actually has committed crimes, and even the US newspapers have actually documented that he has committed crimes. So he is but instead, it was literally just the sheer arrogance. They do not want to listen. In their minds, I really see this. They're like, we are white men. You don't tell us what to do. We're going to do whatever we want to do. And if we want to tell the story like this, this is what we are going to do. And we damn if any Haitian tells us otherwise. That is exactly what is happening.
Isn't it interesting who some of these voices aggrandize or elevate as heroes, and who they demonize is always so interesting. Daniela, before we go, please tell everybody when the demonstrations are and where they are. Hope to see more Ethiopians, Eritreans at them. I know we've had some that were going to or showing up at the New York location. Where are they happening this time?
Yes, so the next large demonstration is happening on November 18th. And it's going to be at 3:00. It's a Friday. And that demonstration is going to be in front of Haiti Liberté. Haiti Liberté is the fake newspaper that is actually being propped up to really confuse Haitians, to make Haitians feel like they are in solidarity, but in fact, they are promoting their own agenda. So the Haitian community is going to rally in front of that newspaper building to really make our voices known, to let Haiti Liberté know, to Eve Kim and Dan Cohen know that this is not your community. You do not belong here. We don't know you. And Haitians are tired of you coming in and telling us that who we should see as, as revolutionary. So
is that based in New York?
Yes, that's in Brooklyn, New York. So the address is, and it's also on my Twitter page. You can actually go to Daughter of Dessalines or @DBNMA. The address is 1583 Albany Avenue, and it's in Brooklyn, New York. And it's Friday, November 18, and it starts at 3 p.m. And that day, we are going to tell both Dan Cohen and Kim Eves that, they are not going to push the joke that PHTK gang leader is a revolutionary, that we know better, and you cannot teach the children of Dessalines about revolutions, because we are revolutionary people. So we would recognize a revolutionary when we see one, and it is not. And they have zero credibility to tell any Haitian what a revolutionary should look like. So I hope everybody comes that day. to support us and to really collectively to send a message that enough is enough. You need to back off. He is not a revolutionary, and you are not gonna basically insult the memory of those people in Haiti that this man has actually killed, according to documented newspapers. So thank you so much for letting me have this time to really explain.
Thank you. Thank you for always your insight. I did put the November 18th Haiti rally in Brooklyn, New York at the bottom of my screen. I'll make sure to share it on my Twitter account, and I'll share it from whatever Daniela has, to make sure you guys follow her. It's D Bienami, Bienamie, right? I'm going off my...
No, you're good. You're right. You're good.
I got it. So thank you so much, Daniela. Looking forward to talking more. Please let us know if there are any updates on Haiti's fight for sovereignty. And we're right behind you. Ethiopians and Eritreans, as you know, are very much engaged in what's going on in Haiti. And I do hope some of us can show up on at the rally on November 18th. It's very...
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Pamela. It's always great chatting with you.
Appreciate
See you soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Hi, guys. You guys are still with me. I really wanted to make the show shorter today, but it went long. So thank you for your patience, or thank you for staying engaged, rather, in all your great comments and questions. Please make sure you share this link with those who may not have been able to watch the live link. You know, I am expecting some sort of announcement from the Ethiopian government in the next day or two about the peace talks or negotiations in South Africa. So as soon as I have something, I will let you guys know. If it's good, I will definitely pop on as a breaking news live stream and let you guys know. Please support independent journalism by going to patreon.com/HermelaTV and becoming a member. Or you can go to eoanews.com and hit donate, or eoanews.com/donation, which will take you directly there. You can either do a one-time contribution or become a monthly member. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for all your great questions. I mean, I didn't even need to prepare as much as I did today, because so many of you had really good questions, some of which I wouldn't have been able to come up with by myself. So thank you. I'll see you guys tomorrow night, same time, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, with the top stories out of Africa from the perspective of the African people. www.eoanews.com online and on youtube.com/HermelaTV. Have a wonderful night, or if you're watching from Ethiopia, good morning. See you soon.